Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 105 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to continue on with part 2 of our series, The Tipping Point for Better Shooting with Light Rifles. And what a great podcast this is going to be. We just finished up another one of our long range shooting schools. And again, the scene plays out over and over and over again about, what calibers and weight and how much of a difference that makes in shooters' fundamentals and just how they can run the rifle both efficiently, effectively, and grow quickly as well. So going to be a great podcast with that. Really looking forward to a great show here. So without further ado, here we go. So before we get started, I would like to say a quick thank you to a couple of our sponsors. This show is proudly brought to you by Wolf Precision's online long-range shooting school, where you can attend a world-class long-range shooting school from the comfort of your own home. So you can stop over to wolfprecision.net and get more information on our online long-range shooting school there. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels, also a proud sponsor of the show, and maker of world-class cut rifle barrels with a new program called KriegerDirect.com, where you can log on, pick out your barrel in inventory, and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So for more information, you can stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com. So we were talking about the tipping point on how to shoot light rifles better, in how weight and all of these things play a huge factor in a shooter's ability to run a rifle efficiently and effectively, right? And in combination with that, the caliber selection and how huge of a role that plays as well. So before we talk about what we've seen in the very last shooting school we just finished up, I just want to continue on what we were talking about with the last podcast. And it's not a pitch for the 22 Creedmoor to be the end-all, be-all, ultimate hunting rifle for anything in North America. What it is, though, is just a conversation about why do hunters do everything the exact opposite when it comes to building their rifles, selecting their rifles, or selecting their calibers that match shooters do. And I'm talking any type of match shooter. When you look at bench rest, both short range, mid range, long range, so 100, 200 yard bench rest, they have a weight limit, but heavy rifles, small calibers. When you get into long range bench rest, especially when you get into the unlimited weight, now you're getting really heavy rifles with big calibers, really heavy. I'm talking like, 30, 40, 50 pounds in some cases. You get into tactical and sniper matches, medium to small calibers. For the most part. I mean, you'd see a 301 mag every once in a while, but rarely. But again, heavy rifles, 14, 16, 18 pounds. Now enter in PRS, 20, 22 pounds, and super small calibers, thanks to hidden indicators and all these other cool things we can put on steel at distance to know that we hit the target. Now you're entering in, 6 BR, 6 BRX, 6 Dasher, 6 DT, 6 Creedmoor, 243, even smaller than what traditionally was like the 260, 6.5 Creed. You're seeing people even step down further. And yet, at the same time, going extremely heavy, 20, 22 pounds, unheard of weights. And, just to stop and think about the reason why. If we just step back and look at it, if we were to do the opposite, right? If we were to say, okay, everybody's shooting in these long-range competitions or precision-type shooting, all of a sudden, you've got to build a rifle exactly like the ultralight hunting rifles in big bores. So everything that you're doing now, you have to flip 180 degrees and still compete. So now your PRS shooters have to shoot 300 Win Mags and 300 Weatherbees and rifles that weigh 6 to 8 pounds. You've got bench rest shooters, short range bench rest rifles, and 300 Win Mag, 338 Lapua. You've got your 1,000-yard bench guys that traditionally would be 30, 40, 50-pound rifles. And same thing with short range bench rest. having to build 6, 8, 9-pound rifles and shoot calibers like the 338 Lapua, 300 Win Mag, 375 Chi-Tech. Imagine if we did that. Nobody would be scoring anything. I mean, the beatings on the firing line would be just relentless and probably even a little funny to watch. People's fundamentals would just completely fall apart, and scores, I will guarantee it, guaranteed, minimum cut in half. So why do we put ourselves in those situations when we get into building a hunting rifle? Now, when I built a hunting rifle for myself, I was a little bit odd. My wife would probably nod and smile and laugh at that. But, I always built a rifle, and we just talked about this in the class that we just finished, is I would up the weight of the rifle. I would do a combination of that, suppressor, brake, whatever I had to do. But I would do that in direct combination with the caliber that I'm building to control it, to make it comfortable to shoot, and to potentially, hopefully, spot my own shots beyond 300 yards. So, for example, my 264 Win Mag that I took out elk hunting was a heavy-barreled 26-inch rifle, aftermarket stock, probably came in around the maybe 12, 13-pound mark, and I could spot my own shots beyond 300 yards with no brake, no suppressor, or anything like that. But I intentionally built it heavier because if I went too light, the rifle gets way too jumpy, things going on all over the place, and just really, for shooters, just destroys your fundamentals. And so I go back to the same question is what if we did quite the opposite in long-range match shooting of any kind, whether it's bench rest or PRS and all that, and we say, okay, now rather than going big, heavy, and small calibers, you have to do the 180, you have to shoot ultralight rifles, and you've got to build it in these massive calibers that people take hunting. And I will watch the scores plummet. I mean, world-class shooters that are winning every year would struggle to even place in a match just because these things destroy fundamentals. They just wear a shooter out. It's like voluntarily being kicked by a mule over and over again. There are people that can take it for sure. And there are those who be like, this is nuts, And there are those that would be like, after the second kick, every time the mule flinched, you'd be like, oh my gosh, shaking in your boots a little bit. So where did it come from? Like, what are the roots of these big calibers? Because, these big calibers weren't around, when you go back in history as to what people were shooting. Yeah, they had through the 1800s, they were shooting giant lead balls. But when you get into what we were getting into, like the modern rifles, think like right at the dawn of Weatherby and right at the beginning when you started to see like 300 Win Mags and these cartridges come on the line. Before that, cartridges were actually, 30-06 was a big caliber, and 6.5 by 55 Swede. There was a lot of cartridges available, but really, reasonable. Let's just say reasonable. And then it seems like maybe there's three schools of thought with this when we start breaking in through the 60s and 70s, and it spilled clean over in today, right? The calibers are even getting bigger, and it's like we've got to flex muscles, and it's the guy with the biggest score sheet, the most recoil is the winner. But I think there's three things involved with this. Number one, a lot of people that go out west hunting really go overgunned, like overprepared. In their minds, like we used to have customers call all the time, even building their children rifles, like, hey, I'm going to build my son a deer rifle. And I would have this conversation, and I'd be like, oh, that's great. That's really awesome. I'm going to build him a custom rifle. And he goes, yeah, I'm thinking 300 WSM, 300 Winchester short mag. And I'm like, wow. I built some of these in hunting rifles. They will click your teeth together. And I was like, well, how old's your son? 12. This is a true story. And for me, I was like, oh my God. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, 12? Really? And I said to the guy, I said, look, I've built these, and I'm not saying that your 12-year-old can't shoot it, but why? Why for a deer rifle? And he's like, well, just in case it's a bad shot, he'll at least kill it. And I was like, in my mind, now I didn't tell him this, but in my mind, I'm saying, A, you're guaranteeing it's a bad shot, and B, you're risking losing your new hunting partner. Look, I was at the range with my niece once when she was 12, and I remember her dad had bought a ultra lightweight 243. I mean, she's 12-year-old, 13, 14 maybe. He bought a 243 and showed up at the range with 105 grain bullets. And within 4 or 5 rounds, she was flinching and almost in tears. I mean, she was crying. And of course, Dad's frustrated and yelling at her, "Hey, you have to learn to shoot this." And I said to him, I'm like, "Hey, Mike, did you shoot this?" He goes, "No, it's a 243. I'm like, "Look, you're shooting a 105 grain bullet out of a 6.5 pound 243. And I personally have had 243s that weighed that much, but I shot 70 grainers for varminting. And I'm like, "Hey, just shoot it one time." So he got on the gun and pulled the trigger and he got off. He's like, "Holy shit, that kicks like a mule." And it's not that it's hard, but because of the weight of the rifle, it's a very fast, sharp snap. And of course, a lot of jumping going on. And 243 shooting a 105 grain bullet out of a 6.5 pound hunting rifle, it will surprise you. And I think he was totally stunned, like in his mind when he bought it, because he shoots a 300 Win Mag, that this is easy caliber to shoot, doesn't matter the bullet. And that's not the case. So the same thing happens when you get the mentality of the guys going out west, is just like that gentleman that called to try to build a gun for his son. In your mind, you're thinking you have to go with the biggest that you can handle. You have to shoot a really heavy bullet, that these animals are just super tough. And I'm guessing that there's situations that they can be. But, I think the point being is a lot of guys that go out west go out overgunned. They're just sort of overdoing everything for those worst case scenarios. And in the end, hurt themselves as shooters. So that's number one, right? Number two is the bullet designs from the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s. We didn't have bullets back then like we have now. Traditional hunting bullets through the years have been soft-pointed or lead-pointed bullets. Boat tail hollow points or a round nose or a soft point. And notoriously so, they don't like to penetrate. Sometimes they blow up easy at high speeds, low speeds. So number two would be, because of the notorious problems with bullets and just limited selections of really high quality bullets, it would make sense to go really big and heavy in the bullet category. And that way, as the bullet either comes apart or blows apart, it's got enough chunk left to it to get into the animal and kill it. So that's part of the equation for sure. And then I think the third part is just peer pressure. You read all of the articles, and over the years, every year you get the hunting magazines, or most of the articles, honestly, are written by people who don't really go out and do what we do. Some are. I don't mean to discredit them all, but look, their job is to bring in advertising dollars from companies, and they're not going to write bad articles for anybody. The other thing is every year these companies have a contest to outdo each other. They got to go bigger, they got to go faster, they got to hit harder, and so you've got this rat race going on, and each year trying to one up each other up the scale of horsepower, and so now we've got calibers that are just crazy. Like 338 Lapua, I thought was huge. Now you got 375 Chi-Tecs, and you've got all these custom Wildcats. I call them booming louders, but like there's just a gauntlet of it. And the fact of the matter is again, it leads us to say, okay, well, when you go out hunting and you're standing around with a group of guys, and just think if we were talking about cars the same way we talk about calibers, right? You've got 4 or 5 of your friends, you're sitting around dinner time, you just got back in from hunting, or you're just showing up to camp. And one guy's like, "Yeah, I drive a 3/4 ton Chevy." Next guy's like, "I drive a 1 ton Ford diesel." The next guy's, I'm a 1 ton Dodge with dually and crew cab. And then you chime in and say, "Well, I drive a Prius." It's the same thing happens with calibers, right? It's like this competition as to this big bad. The caliber is part of the hat that you wear, And so same thing happens. Same thing happens, right? So what I've learned, like this last class was just absolutely phenomenal. I got to say, what a great group of guys we had come into the long range shooting school, and no experience, right? None to speak of. One we built a custom rifle for about 2 years ago. He is on our online long-range shooting school as well, which is really awesome. His name is Gary. The other two, one used a school rifle, one brought a factory rifle. And as much as factory rifles can survive the class and can hit stuff at distance, typically speaking, custom rifles will generally do 20 to 50% better and score period right across the gate if it's of good quality, right? So yes, factory rifles can shoot at distance, and they can, he hit a gallon water jug at 1,000 yards. But on test day, consistency, all that stuff, you get into the school rifles, they're built to perform, and they're just able to hold up a little bit better accuracy over distance. So one had used his brat rifle, and the other had used one of our school rifles. And the gentleman that used the school rifle had no experience whatsoever, took the Top Gun hat, highest score in the class, and probably beat the average high score, because we do have a shooting test on last day with 12 to 14 mile an hour winds, which isn't crazy, but it's enough, probably by an average of 150 points on test day. And what was awesome to watch is just watch how he started running the rifle and how consistent he started shooting, and how quickly he started working on the fundamentals. I mean, he was shooting a life-size coyote that we have out at 1,000 yards, and he planted 2 rounds on the coyote in the chest that were probably an inch and a half apart. He broke 2-gallon water jugs back to back at 1,000 yards, and everybody knows the size of a gallon water jug. And the rifle and the cartridge in combination really do well, but he still has to be a good shooter to do that, right? He has to run the rifle. The rifle's not going to do it. You just can't reach down and pull the trigger, and the rifle is magically going to aim itself and hit stuff. That doesn't work. So you can't discredit the shooter on this one. And it was just amazing to watch. Again, a rifle with a low enough recoil that allows the shooter to shine, and a heavier rifle, so on and so forth. So again, the 22 Creed just performed great. I mean, just absolute fun training cartridge. So where I'm going with this in this part 2 is, I think with the modern cartridges, they sort of take over where we were talking about the 3 things as to what led to this super, magnumitis type mentality. And I'm not knocking magnums. There are plenty of people that can shoot them. I don't argue that whatsoever. But there are plenty that can't, right? And for my example, like if you made every match shooter all of a sudden shoot a rifle like a hunting rifle, like a 6 to 8 pound and big caliber, your scores would just plummet to nothing. I mean, there's no doubt that that's what would happen. I would love to get 30 world-class shooters together and hand them some of these cartridges and have them run the same course with a different rifle and just watch. I mean, their fundamentals are going to start to get hard to handle. Mentally, physically, they just get worn out. So I think when we were addressing the first 3 issues of, you've got the history of where they came from, you've got the mentality of, okay, we've got to go big because our bullets weren't really, where they should have been or where they are now, how tough and how they're able to penetrate at lower speeds and do just more damage. And then on top of that, when you get into the pickup truck and Prius guy having a conversation about calibers, right? If you ignore all of that and you think about what's addressed the modern cartridge designs, they're capable of running at speeds that are just absolutely unbelievable, taking full advantage of the lighter recoiling rifles without the sacrifice of recoil. So like the 22 Creed shooting an 88 grain bullet, the amount of energy that bullet has on target is stunning. I mean, it dimples our AR 500 plates at 350 yards and hits it like a hammer. So you take that, you take the 6mm, 6.5 Creed. All of these are optimal case designs to shoot, on average, heavy bullets for what they were made to shoot. So they could shoot, like, for example, the 6.5s, you can get bullet weights down into the 90 range if you want. But typically speaking, most of them are set up to shoot 140, 143, 147, the heavier 4 caliber bullets, which again just add to the BC, they add to the energy downrange, and they're doing them at reasonable speeds. So when you take modern case design and then you combine that with the bullets, and here's the key to this, you've got bullets like the 77 grain cutting edge, and they make one called a Raptor, where someone with a 22 Creed shot a black bear and it penetrated both shoulders and wound up on the other side in the fur. You can go on Cutting Edge's website, look up I think it's a 60 grain Raptor or 65 grain, something like that, and you can read the reviews. I mean, this is somebody that posted up their review of the bullet. Now, I'm not saying I'm going out shooting black bear, with the 60 grain bolt, but I'm just saying it's been done. Brock Markwell, who helps us at King of the Mountain, his daughter shot a black bear with a 223 and killed it. I have, he sent me pictures. Reasonable distance, good bullets. I think they were shooting Barnes TSX, and she shot a big bear and killed it right in its tracks. So what I'm saying is I think the pendulum's going to start swinging the other way, because I think there's a big educated market out there now with shooters and hunters that realize that Like, for example, we had a customer go to Africa and hunt big cats, and he took a small caliber. And when he got there, the caliber was maybe not what everybody there wanted it to be, but harvested his animal perfectly anyway. I think when you do that, you wind up with better shooters. I really do. So you go out to any type of deer size animal and under, there are so many bullets now in these what would used to be considered marginally accepted calibers that now are capable of doing massive damage, massive pass-throughs, and just allow the shooter to focus. And so think about what the match shooters were doing. They went super heavy and super light in caliber, super heavy in rifle, super light in caliber. Now the tipping point, I think, for hunting rifles is we can go super light in rifle and light in caliber and expect to see the same performance that the match shooters are getting. To be able to shoot at that level with a hunting weight rifle, to be able to shoot that precisely with a hunting weight rifle, to be able to still harvest your animal, albeit maybe a little closer than, everybody has their own moral compass as to how far they want to shoot and how far they want to shoot at or hit animals. So you got to sneak within 300 yards. Is it the end of the world? I love archers because they can sneak within 50 yards of everything. So 300 to 500 yards on a deer-sized animal, I think a 22 Cree is incredible. I really do. I think mule deer size and under, that's what my hunting rifle is built in. And what I'm experiencing is the fact that now we're able to take a new shooter or a new hunter, like we're able to do with the new shooters here, is they can learn the art, they can master, they can train, they can become world-class shooters with rifles that world-class shooters couldn't shoot if they were in massive calibers. So I just want to challenge you a little bit to think about this next time you're talking about calibers or thinking about calibers, and avoid the people that just get on their soapbox and preach and scream and yell, right? So I'm not saying that everybody that shoots big calibers is wrong, and I'll be the first to say that there are people that I've met that can shoot walloping calibers and really doesn't seem to bother them a bit. It's amazing. But I think they're outside the normal person. I think the normal person, if they really were to admit to themselves that they're just not having that much fun, shooting these big calibers. And so you got a choice. So I challenge you, here's the last thing I want to say about this for the tipping point is my rifle, I could probably, if I change my scope to a reasonably wide scope, because I have a really heavy scope on my rifle, and I've got a probably close to 1.5 pound suppressor on there, right? And so my rifle right now is right around the 10-pound mark with some carbon on it. And I could probably drop another 6 ounces going with the magnesium chassis. I could probably drop at least 6 or 8 ounces on the scope. And so there's 1 pound. And I could probably drop another 1.5 pounds, on the suppressor if I just wanted to shoot it unsuppressed or anything like that. So I think I could personally get this rifle into that 8-pound range, maybe a little less, in the 7 with optics. And you could probably even get into the 6-7 pound range if you really sacrificed optics and, try to stay super light the whole way around, just mindful of every part and piece. But what I found was my personal rifle now in 22 Creed is in a really sturdy chassis, like I'm shooting the XLR element. That rifle is not out of place at 1,000 yards, which is what I find amazing, is that now I've got a hunting rifle that typically speaking would not be used for any type of long-range practicing, right? That, you go out and you shoot a couple zero shots, maybe shoot some steel at 300, 400, 500 yards, and that would be the end of it. But I'm so comfortable with the rifle, and the rifle performs so well, and it's so strong. Like the cartridge, the optics, the chassis, it doesn't flex, it bends. I wouldn't even be afraid to go and throw it in a match. You could take my hunting rifle, give it to a world-class shooter, and send them to a match, and I will guarantee that they're still going to place and shoot well. There's your tipping point, is that we now have rifles that are no longer outside their zone when they get stretched out at distance for training, for practice, even for match shooting. that's what I find amazing. I could take my hunting rifle, throw it on the ground, and shoot it to 1,000 yards, and it is 100% inside its element. So I just want to challenge you fundamentally to think about your next hunting rifle, to think about what you're going after, select the caliber and weight combination that you think you can get by with, whether you want to break suppressor to even calm it down more. But then I think if you select the right bullet, you can even step down 1 or 2 more notches in caliber and still have great performance in almost anything you're going after. So if you get a chance, stop over to the Facebook page. I'm going to post up something on what's your favorite lightweight hunting cartridge or caliber, or what are you currently shooting, and let's just take a poll. We'll have some fun with it. Again, no arguments, no crazy stuff. But we'll start up a little poll to have people chime in on some of the lighter weight rifles that they're carrying out hunting, and people that are shooting smaller cartridges and some of the animals that they've taken. So, for example, I'll post up a picture of Brock, if he allows me, with his daughter and her 223 she shot a bear with. I think that's incredible. And I'm not being a propaganda machine saying everybody should go out bear hunting with a 223. I'm just saying if you know your limits, you pick the right bullet, and you practice really well, you can do amazing things with these rifles and do it a lot better than you could if you jump into a Magnum of some sort. So some updates I want to go over here real quick. We did have a slot open up for our long-range shooting school that kicks off on May 9th through 11th. So if you're interested, our schools are booked up solid through summer. So we have one slot that just popped open. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. You can stop over to wolfprecision.net, register online, and we'll get you all squared away. We will be in the shop through Saturday, so you can call and register online, whatever you'd like to do. We'd love to have you. Our online long-range shooting school, we'd love to have you stop over if you want to take a peek at that. Of course, it supports the podcast here. And then we also have a new page on our website for the podcast. So if you'd like to support the podcast, we'd like to invite you to become one of our Patreon members. And our way of saying thank you, as we post up all of our audio content, bonus content that is, that would be for the online long-range shooting school, you can stop over and you can listen to it. So it's all going to be these bonus podcast or audio instructionals that we're accompanying our online long-range shooting school with. You can become a patron and you can stop over and listen to any of the bonus content. A, we really appreciate the support for the show. And then also B, we want to thank you. So you can stop over to wolfprecision.net and go to our podcast page. You can register there. You can find us on Patreon. It's Jamie Dotson's Extraordinary Guide to Accuracy, and you can register there. Love to have you. Quick 2 shout-outs to some sponsors here for the show. We'd like to thank MDT. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show, maker of world-class chassis. We use them here at the shooting school. The new HNT is a big hit here for ultralight hunting rifles, and we have built several. We have several in inventory. And in these really light caliber 6.5 Creed and under, they are just absolutely a blast to shoot. So if you're interested in upgrading your factory rifle, they make a lot of aftermarket stocks for these. And if you want to build a custom, of course, we have tons of chassis to choose from. So you can stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. Pick out your chassis today. We'd also really like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech's a very proud sponsor of the show. We use all of their triggers in our custom rifles, and of course, they make a lot of aftermarket triggers for other manufacturers out there as well. And I will tell you, if you want to shoot better, if you want to upgrade your rifle, one of the first things you can do is put a great trigger in it, and we believe TriggerTech is one of the best. It's all we use here at our school as well, and it's amazing. You got a 2-pound trigger, 1.5-pound trigger in a rifle, and the students think it's breaking at 1 pound because it breaks so clean. So stop over to triggertech.com, triggertech.com, and check out all the triggers that they offer today. Well, that'll about do it for this episode. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us here at the show. So if you liked our podcast, please subscribe. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show, you can stop over to our website, wolfprecision.net, or click in the link down below and you can become a patron and support the show. We really appreciate that as well. And in the next podcast, we're going to talk about the knock and the arrow. So we get lots of questions about the ACE and what it does and why it works so well when it comes to building the world-class rifles that we do. And really, it's about building a better system and putting a system in place that's repeatable. So if you want to know why modern arrows shoot so well, it's because they make the nock, the tip, and the arrow all separate and put them together, making almost the perfect arrow. Same thing happens with a barrel. When you drill a barrel, you're almost in essence taking a stick, carving a point on it, and putting a nock in the back. So by taking the critical part of the chamber and making it separate and taking care of the barrel, the throat, and everything separately. And then putting the 2 better made pieces together makes a better product. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I call it the knock and the arrow. And we'll talk a little bit about the ACE system and some of the new stuff we have coming out with it as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at the show. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, we always really appreciate that as well. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.